Hey friends, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing installment number 2 for 10 podcasts you should binge listen, because I'm obsessed with podcasts and they are all the rage, and why not have some more recommendations? Worth mentioning that if you happen to be new to my channel, I would highly encourage you to subscribe. There's a little button somewhere. Look around the square here. But I put out videos twice a week. I also have a podcast myself called The Sandwich, and I'll share more about that in a minute. But here you will find conversation, real things, real life, real talk, real bodies, real people, all the real stuff. Cool? First on my list is a podcast called Heavyweight. This is a very interesting podcast. First of all, it comes from the production company, I think it's called a production company, Gimlet. Gimlet tends to put out really amazing podcasts. When I first started listening, like way back to Homecoming, which actually is becoming a movie or a show if it hasn't already, I was blown away at just the production level, the type of content, like the type of conversations. It was fascinating to me, and they haven't disappointed me yet. So this Heavyweight show is honestly about things that are weighing heavy on you. So this person, Jonathan Goldstein, the host, first of all, I feel like this kindred connection with him because he's from Montreal. He's Jewish. I know a lot of Jewish people from Montreal. His voice is like the perfect host voice. His humor, I just laugh all the time. And it kind of goes like a journalist type of reporting to very intimate conversation, where it's something like one episode I listened to, a girl had become pregnant at about 17 and never told the father about this pregnancy, and now the daughter is 10 years old and their lives are very different, and she had valid reasons for not telling the birth father, and so she gets in touch with Jonathan Goldstein, the host of Heavyweight, and they figure out a way to reach out and tell the dad. So he's called an interlocutor. Let me look up this word here. Interlocutor? Sure. It's a person who takes part in a dialogue or conversation. So he kind of acts like this middleman, and then also tends to accompany people. Like if they were going to go meet the birth father in real life, like he would go with the girl. Anyway, lots of different types of stories. I've laughed, I've cried. It's been a journey, and I feel like I've kind of binge listened to the seasons over the course of the holidays. Highly recommend it. Number 2 is a podcast called Hell and Gone. This was, I think, recommended to me, or else it kept getting suggested to me. It's 8 episodes, and it's definitely binge listen worthy, and I gotta tell you, I'm a big chicken, okay? Like, I used to be able to watch all those crime shows. No, cannot do that anymore. I need to sleep at night, and honestly, it is like dark and scary and heavy, and I get really spooked out. However, it like dips its toe in scary. First of all, the place in like the setting of the story, super creepy. It falls along the lines of journalistic reporting and podcasting, so a lot of it's on the fly, when they're in the car, when they're talking to people. And it definitely is creepy. It takes place in like a really, kind of drug, low poverty, low income type of environment, type of setting. It's about a woman that vanished and they don't really know what happened. Anyway, you gotta go listen to it. It's really well done. It does get a little bit repetitive, which I find is sometimes the case with a lot of these cold case files, because what I've noticed is there's a trend where just a regular person who has an interest in cold cases will find one that fascinates them and then start to dig deep into it. But it is not at the level of Serial, for example. It is not at that. It's not like, you can't compare, but it's interesting nonetheless. Number 3 is a podcast called Pretty Big Deal. This is hosted by Ashley Graham, who is a very she's got a large personality, very gregarious, very entertaining, very quick-witted, and I think she has a lot to offer as a host, and so I've enjoyed listening to all of the episodes. In fact, I think I've listened to them all. It's one of those that every time it pops up, I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this one. I'm gonna listen. So definitely worth listening. She is a model, and she is making waves in the industry for lots of different things, whether it's fashion, body positivity. I know she has her own fashion line, and just conversations that she's willing to have. So definitely worth a listen. Number 4 is a podcast called Sold in America, hosted by Noor Tagouri, I think is her last name, but Noor, Noor. She is just like, there's something about this woman. She's a younger woman, I think mid-20s. First of all, her Instagram is great. Her messaging is beautiful, and this podcast will blow your mind. It talks about the world of selling sex in America. And yes, it is specific to the United States, but she does cover a lot of ground. And I think it's a lot of conversation that needs to be had, very important. And it definitely follows along the lines of journalistic reporting in this podcast, and she's done it really well. Like, this girl is going places, and this is only the beginning. This is the first time I've heard of her. She is actually very good friends with Ashley Graham and was on Pretty Big Deal. And I'd heard about her on Pretty Big Deal, and then I actually heard her as an ad on a previous podcast I've mentioned, which is Unladylike. I heard the ad for this show, Sold in America, and I was like, you know what? I need a new show. I'm gonna listen. It's 7 episodes and some bonus ones, and so it's definitely like a binge-worthy one, and I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. Seriously. Number 5 is an episode called Tilted. This is a Lean In podcast, and so I believe it's Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book Lean In, and it's all about women in business and just how women are navigating the workplace, and this podcast falls in line with that. And so I just wanted to get the right write-up for this particular podcast, and it says, the podcast explores the uneven playing field, the gender bias that lurks in unexpected places, and the impact it has. So it is conversations that I think are like, oh yeah, I never thought about that, or I didn't know that that was happening. Or like, there was one episode about a young basketball player, female, who started doing, what are they called? Dunking, like slam dunks in basketball. And it was like, I have never thought about that. I would never think about that in my regular day-to-day life. I'm not huge into watching sports or even paying attention, honestly. But when I listened to this podcast, it like opened a part of my brain. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. I learned something new. Number 6 is a podcast called Making Oprah. Now, I have to say, most of the podcasts I'm mentioning have been recommended to me by friends, by you guys, whether it's on Instagram or here, or even on the last video I made. And this one was recommended to me by a friend. Fascinating. So I had been sharing with her how I was feeling a little discouraged, a little overwhelmed. I was losing my focus and like what I was creating here online. And she was like, you need to go listen to this. So at the moment, it's called Making Obama. So if you want to search it, just heads up. But the first 5 episodes are Making Oprah. I think it's 5. Yeah, 5 episodes and a bonus. There's a few bonus ones in there. And it really shares Oprah's journey, like from when she started, how she got to where she was, some of the thought process and her creating the content and staying on the air for as long as she has and continues to adapt and change. You know, she has her own podcast. But I found the part that was most impactful to me was where she spoke about her intention. What was Oprah's intention? And the most fascinating bit, and I would love to know if you've listened to this one, was that it really was what her intention, like she set an intention for the show. This is my motto. This is my expectation for every episode. I want people to feel this way or walk away feeling a certain way. And she built her, you know, her empire around that. Did you know the whole live your best life? She basically made that up. Like that was Oprah. And there's so much, being a woman now in my mid-30s, that I was impacted by Oprah, that I lead my life in ways that I didn't even know were sort of put in place, you know, in a foundation created by Oprah. That sounds very dramatic, but go listen to if you get a chance and you're interested, when you listen to those episodes, you'll have to let me know what you think about it. But it was amazing. Like, even people who aren't fans of Oprah, I mean, you cannot discredit the work that she did and the success that she had, and all the while remaining so true to herself. I mean, I love how she even goes into parts where she talks about mistakes that she's made and things that she would have done differently, especially around body positivity, her weight loss, her weight gain, all that kind of stuff. Fascinating. Number 7 is a podcast called Strangers. How many times have I said podcast in this video? Let's try to say something else. Strangers is a show. What is it about? First of all, I love the host, Leah Tao. She's got one of those breathy voices. I think she's from Denmark, and so there's definitely a little accent there. I found out later throughout the show, and as I was listening and binging all of them, that she is a mom. Her story to how she became a mom, very interesting. Unfortunately, though, the podcast doesn't have any new episodes, so it's one of those that once you listen to them all, it's done. And I wish it would come back, because essentially it's like these short stories around people and their experiences, and very much a journalistic approach. It dives deep. there's layers, and it just sucks you in. There's a calming experience that comes from this, the music that's selected, the tone of her voice, the way she asks questions. You feel like you're just settling in. Like you've got a nice hot cup of tea and you're just sitting down and you're like settling in to this conversation. And I've been very moved. I've had tears. I've laughed. There was a really interesting one about this guy who had all of these like illnesses, and he was trying all these weird different things to try and like combat this illness. And people thought he was kind of crazy. I kind of thought he was crazy as I was listening to this episode. And she like interviews him and goes through this whole thing, and then comes back like a year later and talks to him again and how much his life has changed, and what it was that actually brought about the change was very simple. Anyway, it's very interesting, and I would encourage you to listen to it and let me know what you think. Number 8 is a podcast called Happier in Hollywood. This is a fairly new one to my list, and it's by 2 women hosts, and one of them, there's another podcast called Happier. That one I can't get into it for some reason. I don't know what it is. It's a little bit more talk at you, very scripted. I must admit I have a very hard time with those kinds of shows that feel very much like I don't know, like it's too fast or something. I like to have like a calm energy when I'm podcasting. I like it to feel very relaxed. I like it to feel very much like a conversation. So I'm giving it some time though, because I've been known to change my mind about things. And so Happier in Hollywood though is all about these 2 women. They're 2 writers in Hollywood. They've been around for a long time. They've each had success together, like they're a team, a duo, and they're women. And I think I feel so much of like this connection with them because of the space that I work in, working in social media, making a living off of creating content, putting yourself out there, being creative. There are a lot of similarities between what I do and what they do. And so there's even been like little catchphrases like, it's a great job and I love doing it, or things like this. Like there's just all these little great catchphrases where I'm like, yes, or oh, I never thought about that in an interview. Or so if you have any inclination towards working in this industry or working in Hollywood or becoming a writer, or you are a writer, like anything that involves creativity, you will love this podcast, I hope. Anyway, I've enjoyed it. It was recommended to me by a friend and I quite like it. And it's funny because there are parts of it that are not scripted, but they have segments like from the writer's desk or treadmill or something, or, you know, from a viewer question. And they have these little segments which make it enjoyable to listen to. It definitely feels like a show, which is fine. Anyway, I enjoy it. Number 9 is a show called S-Town. This is binge-worthy. You will ignore your friends and family to finish this show. If you can get into it. It is a little bit of a slow start. I was like, what am I listening to? I'm not sure about this. I can't remember off the top of my head how many episodes there are. Journalist style of reporting. If I remember correctly, because it's been a minute since I listened to it, essentially what happens is it's from one of the writers or producers of This American Life, I think. One of the people that work on This American Life, which is a very successful podcast. So he starts getting in touch with this person from this town, this small town, and there's all these dramas and all this stuff happening. And anyway, kind of lures him into this story. And after a while, finally this person from This American Life is like, I want to go meet this guy, this person that's been emailing me. So he goes, and oh my goodness, this story unfolds in its real life. And it's fascinating, and there's twists and there's turns, and the end will shock you. I was like, what? Very interesting. S-Town, which stands for shit town, because the person feels that he's living in a shit town where there's not a lot of possibilities, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of poverty. Fascinating stuff. Real good. But it's one of those polarizing shows where I've had some people be like, didn't love it, like when I was talking about it on Instagram, and other people were like me and like could not get enough of it. So curious to know where you fit on the spectrum. And number 10, this one is a little bonus one that was recommended to me by a friend. It is called Offline, the podcast. The host actually is based out of Australia, and Allison works in the industry of content creation and social media, but more behind the scenes. Like she has, if I'm not mistaken, worked on a magazine. I could be wrong. Forgive me. Anyhow, So a friend of mine that I work with suggested this podcast to me, and what she does is she takes like prominent Instagram people from Australia, whether they're business owners, usually it's women, I think it's been all women so far, so business owners, content creators, influencers, fitness people, jewelry makers, like whatever it is, they make their business online. And she wants to talk to them about what happens offline. Like, you know, how do you balance your online life with your offline life? How do you maintain, you know, your mental health, your self-care? What about the messages that we're sending to young women today about this as a job? And so I find it very interesting. And I will say, just from a production side of things, I enjoy the way that she's creating these episodes. I enjoy the way the audio goes. Like, it sounds like there's a door opening, and then she fades the music and she comes back in and gives you little anecdotes, and then she comes back to the guest and then she pulls out again. And so it's very, it's lovely on your ears, to be honest, to just listen to this. And I appreciate it from a point of entertainment value, from a point of conversation, but then also just from production, knowing how much work goes into actually putting together something like this. And I just think it's wonderful, and I hope she keeps it up. So those are my 10 episodes, and I would love to know if you've listened to any of these, what you thought of them, and then of course share with me any of your favorites, because I go through podcasts like it's crazy, and I'm always looking for more, because you know, sometimes you kind of like ebb and flow. Like for some reason I haven't been listening to as much of Armchair Expert lately. I'm like, I want more women on that show, and so I'm kind of like waiting for women to pop on the show when I know they're trying to get more female guests. Anyways, and so you kind of like come in and out of episodes and podcasts, and sometimes I'll start something and realize I'm not really into this and I'll abandon it. And so anyway, it's all a matter of personal taste, and thank goodness there are tons of shows out there to enjoy. All right guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.